The last couple of days have seen the Facebook stock price once again break out to fresh all-time highs. So with earnings due out at the end of July, is this going to be the start of yet another move higher for Facebook? Or actually, is it perhaps getting a little bit ahead of expectations? I think Facebook's always an interesting one to look at. One of the FANG stocks, of course, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and a great run. Since the March lows last year in 2020, 140 a share, now at the time of recording, trading above $370. I suppose what's interesting that from August of last year through to about May of this year, we've seen it trade broadly sideways. Then it started gaining ground again. We had much better than expected earnings back in April, and perhaps they've been something of a catalyst to make people reevaluate Facebook. So I thought, as usual in this video, let's take a look at it in a bit more detail. Let's talk about some of the recent news, the earnings, look ahead to the next earnings, then come back onto the chart, take a look at things in more detail, and see if there are more gains to come. Hello, I'm David Jones from Capital.com, and I thought in this latest video, we'll take a look at Facebook. Great performance by the stock price this year, earnings coming up on the 28th of July. So I thought, let's take a look at things in a bit more detail. So as usual in this video, I'll talk about some of the recent news about the stock, the levels to watch out for. Then we'll jump back onto the platform, take a look at the charts and see what the technicals say. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, if you could click on subscribe, it does help support the channel, and it means we can continue to push out lots of interesting content throughout the week at the different stocks that we look at. Right, let's get into it and take a look at Facebook in a bit more detail. So in case you weren't sure what Facebook do, they are, of course, social media, social networking service founded in the early 2000s by Mark Zuckerberg and others. It came to the market, so it IPO'd. You could buy shares in Facebook from 2012. The debut price was $38 a share. At the time of recording, less than a decade later, they're trading at pretty much 10 times that IPO price. The company has done so well that, again, at the time of recording, the valuation of Facebook is just over $1 trillion. So they are one of only 6 companies in the S&P where their valuation is bigger than $1 trillion. Their latest earnings came out in April of this year, and they pretty much smashed the market's expectations there. So the market's expectations were for around $2.30 a share. They came in $1 higher than that. So Facebook's last earnings for the quarter were $3.30. And income was almost double from the same period in the previous year. So a fantastic first quarter. What will the second quarter be like? We'll find out on the 28th of July. We know that these so-called FANG stocks have had a great run. Facebook is no exception. The stock for this year is up 36%. Great performance for the year so far means that in recent days, it moved out to fresh all-time highs. And this move to all-time highs is what chart watchers would often call a breakout, and can be a suggestion that perhaps there's more strength to come. Before we take a look at that, let's just have a quick update with the levels to watch. So for me, on the upside, the most immediate hurdle is that most recent high. It's not so far away, $375 a share. I think after that, we're just looking at psychological levels with $400 a share, probably the next likely target that many chart fans will be watching. On the downside, the most recent low comes in at $334 a share just before the breakout, third week of July. But as usual, to put some color on these numbers, let's take a look at the charts in a bit more detail. If we go back longer term on Facebook, back to 2015 on this chart, of course, broadly speaking, we do have this longer term uptrend. But what I want to focus on first of all, the moves since March of last year. So let's just zoom the chart in. So to start things off, let's take a look at a moving average. I thought we'd go a slightly longer term moving average this time around. So a 40-day moving average. What's that? A 2-month moving average, given there are about 20 trading days in a month. Clearly, we get buy signals when the market moves above the moving average, sell signals when it moves below. So if we go back to March of this year, buy signal as the Facebook stock price moved through about $265, where the moving average was, at the time. It did dip briefly here, and that's our sell signal back in May. Dipped briefly below, then crossed back above, and a similar sort of setup recently here. The briefest of dips in mid-July. Didn't close below, arguably, so still held on to that long position, but at the time of recording, still well above that moving average. That moving average is coming in around 343, 344 for the stock. So it would take a fall of about 10% from where we are now to give us a sell signal off that 40-day moving average. Looking at the RSI down here, perhaps not surprising given the run we've seen over the last, it's not even 2 weeks. Not surprising to see the RSI go overbought. So again, suggesting perhaps something of an extreme move for Facebook, and we should be perhaps a little bit wary of some sort of pullback from here. But more of that in a second when we take a look at the price action. So the last time the RSI was overbought, end of June, and it did end up being, I suppose, something of a short-term peak for Facebook, only for it to then go on and surpass it. So perhaps, given the surge and given earnings, perhaps a bit of volatility we could see over these 28th of July earnings. But let's take a look at the trend. So we could pick up on the trend from the March lows, but perhaps what's more relevant, the move since March of this year. Let's just put a trend line on. So our trend looks something like this at the moment. I'd say that dip in July, the third week of July, was the third touch of the trend line. That trend line support at the moment coming in around 340. And I think what's interesting is the breakout that we've seen since April. We had these highs from August of last year, ahead of $310 a share. It did end up being something of a ceiling for the Facebook price until April, when it starts breaking through. We get the surge, I'm guessing, on earnings last time around, and we start building this new trend. So for now, we are still in this trend off the March 2021 lows. So we are almost 5 months into this trend. Lots of support. I think even if we saw Facebook knock back from here, even through the trend line, we've got quite good support coming in ahead of 320. So I think 320 to 340 could well be the zone to watch on Facebook for now. So even though that RSI is suggesting it is overbought and perhaps there's a correction or a slide coming, I think it's only if it takes out that whole 320 to 340 block of support with plenty of technical analysts think that actually maybe this trend is finally running out of steam. So really interesting to watch over the earnings. We saw all-time highs in the last couple of days for the Facebook stock price. Normally that would suggest strength in a market. I don't think Facebook's any different. Let's see how it reacts over the earnings. But for now, I think plenty would be assuming that trend is still up, and any weakness could well end up being a buying opportunity. Let's see how things turn out over the next few weeks. That's it for this update on Facebook. We'll see how they perform after those latest earnings. But for now, from me, David Jones and Capital.com, we'll leave things there. Good luck with your investing. For more trading videos just like this, please subscribe to our channel.